Hello, my name is Russell Myers. Welcome to Issues Unite. So, in the last few days, Russian forces have evacuated the west bank of the Dnieper River in the Kherson district. I had mentioned several videos back that this was a very strong possibility that this may happen, and for a good reason. The Ukrainians never stopped trying to bomb the dam just north of the city of Kherson, which placed the Russian forces and thousands of civilians at risk. And these are the reasons that Russia has stated for evacuating this area. So, as it is, it's kind of amusing once again. When you look at the Ukrainian, reports, they make it sound like this great victory when there was no, the Russians were fighting as they were evacuating, and the Ukrainians took more casualties than the Russians did, like 10-1, when there was really no reason for it. Just wait until the Russian forces actually left the area and then move in. There's a whole bunch of Ukrainian propaganda regarding this. Let's take a quick look here at this. In one spot here, they're talking about the Russian army abandoned at least one S-300 system in the Kherson region during the retreat. Let's talk about this. Okay, in February, Ukraine has started this conflict with a whole bunch of S-300 systems. Well, they either ran out of ammunition or they got damaged during conflict. What you're talking about here is a launcher. If you don't have the missiles to load into the launcher, it's scrap metal. If it's been damaged by combat, it's scrap metal. If the Russians disabled it before evacuating, it's scrap metal. It's no good. It's just launcher. It's just a bunch of tubes, missile tubes, which are used to launch a system. Possibly the vehicle that is attached to it, which the picture isn't clear enough to tell if the vehicle which tows it is also present. So if you don't have the vehicle to be able to move it, it's scrap metal. All right, so this has another effect that the West is not going to talk about. If you take a look here, what this does effectively is shorten the defensive line that Russian forces and the Donetsk, the DPR forces, LPR forces have to defend at this point. And it has the opposing effect that you take a look at this gray area up here, and that was the area that Russia was defending. Well, pretty much. So this is area that they don't have to defend anymore, but it extends the area that Ukrainians have to defend. Same number of soldiers having to defend a longer defensive line. So that's not, that's not exactly the greatest thing. And meanwhile, Russia still has their 300,000 soldiers moving into these areas to defend a shorter defensive line. What this does is to weaken the Ukrainian military even further. Considering the fact that Ukraine is going to continue to try and advance further, it means that they're going to have fewer people to try and fight along a longer line of offense. Now, there are some sources that are saying that this was done for the purpose of negotiations. And there's some talk about Russia and Ukraine talking about, as a compensation or reverse to this, for Ukraine to abandon Bakhmut, which is further to the north. All right, so let's take this out to a broader view here. Russia continues to attack the critical infrastructure in Ukraine, especially energy infrastructure. All of these icons here, those are air defense warnings saying, take cover now, aerial threat. So here's what's happening there. This week, the temperature in Ukraine drops to below freezing. So what does that mean? Zelensky has talked about possibly making plans to evacuate 3 million people out of Kiev and surrounding areas. That means civilians. As I've said before, once you evacuate the civilians, then all you're left with is military personnel. And that means basically anything becomes a valid military target at that point. Now, in Kiev, they are talking about setting up 1,000 warming centers. Well, cities in Germany and in different European cities are talking about setting up warming centers because of lack of energy or the cost of energy, etc. Well, if you are going to, there are already major protests happening across Europe about all of the resources that are being sent to Ukraine. Well, now, if you are going to evacuate 3 million more Ukrainians, where are they going to evacuate to? To Europe. To people that are already getting quite upset about all the resources being sent to Ukraine. Well, now you're going to move 3 million more people into other European countries that already have a lack of energy, a lack of jobs, a lack of housing, a lack of resources, and you expect there to be no social disruption happening because of this. I'm afraid that's not going to work that way. The other thing that the freezing temperatures means is that once the ground freezes enough, then it enables military forces to start moving again. They haven't been able to move very much for the last few weeks because it's been too wet, too muddy, and everything becomes mired if you even try to move it. I used to work and support in the U.S. military, and I did uh, recovery at times, working up the rigging to recover an armored vehicle that was mired in the mud with an armored personnel carrier, an M113. At one point, there was a vehicle that was a 113 that was mired in the mud, and it took no less than 4 other armored vehicles with extremely strong engines to get that armored vehicle stuck out of the mud, unstuck from the mud. So you can't move those vehicles while the ground is wet and muddy. But once it freezes, you can start moving forces again. But I'm going to reiterate that the ground freezing is less of an issue right now than the temperatures dropping themselves. Imagine yourself living in a city that, the temperature drops below freezing and you don't have any energy in your home and you have to go to a warming center each and every night, possibly all day long as well, depending on the energy situation. What social disruptions are you going to have? How much support are you going to have to continue with a conflict under these situations? And this has been, as I've stated from the very beginning, this has been the Russian intent with bombing the energy infrastructure. This has been intended to be a psyop. This is intended to hit the civilian support for the conflict to continue. They've already seen their economy collapse, their industries collapse. If you have no energy, you don't have jobs, you don't have basically anything, you don't have running water. It knocks out communications for long periods of time. So what kind of support are you going to have from your populace if they are suffering, they are freezing, they don't have clean water, they have to go to warming centers, etc., etc.? This is a highly effective tactic. You don't have to kill like Americans forces and Western forces. You don't have to destroy and kill large numbers of civilians. All you have to do is make it very uncomfortable for them to live their everyday lives, and you destroy all support for a conflict. Your populace is going to be screaming for you to negotiate peace terms. So I'm hoping that this is where this leads up to. So where the movement of military forces is concerned, there are a lot of people that have said that nothing is going to happen until spring, but those people are wrong. Once the ground freezes enough, then there will be continued movement of military forces, at least in limited areas. So this week, the U.S. sent another $400 million in aid to Ukraine, or at least promised it. Part of this package is Hawk missiles. As reported from the New Atlas, these Hawk missiles are missiles that were used apparently only by the U.S. Marines, and they have been mothballed for 20 years. You can't just pack them up and send them. They've never been used in combat. They have a rather short range, maybe 5 kilometers. So they have a limited use. They're only for close combat, and they've been mothballed for 20 years. You don't just pack them up and send them. They have to be refurbished before they can even be sent. So you can only refurbish them in small batches, and it's going to take weeks or months before the very first one even gets there. And then they've got a limited combat use. So, I mean, these are things that, why were they never used in combat by the U.S. military? Obviously, they have such a limited use that they never saw a purpose. And yet that's what's being sent. I mean, these are largely probably scrap metal in themselves. Look how many of the Stinger missiles got sent that were inoperable. But this has another effect as well. Even though these things have been mothballed, they were paid for decades ago, it's still going to be considered an increase in the national debt. Why? Because now these weapons that have never seen any use by the U.S. military are going to have to be replaced. So where's the money actually going to go to? It's going to go to weapons contractors to replace these useless weapons, so you and I get to pay for it. Anyway, yeah, that's how that works. The weapons contractors continue to get richer, and you and I continue to have to pay for it. Anyway, whatever is happening in Ukraine now, I'm still hoping that this leads to negotiations, peace talks. Yet we can only cross our fingers and hope for the best. Again, I think that peace talks should have happened long before any conflict ever happened, before a single person ever wound up picking up a weapon. Peace talks should have been happening. Diplomacy should have worked over the last 8 years, but it did not. So let's hope that we are leading to this. Biden has said, whatever happens with Ukraine is up to Ukraine. Yeah, believe that if you want to. While we're still sending more money and more weapons and compiling more debt that you and I and your children and your grandchildren are all going to have to pay for. We are absolutely never going to pay off the national debt at this point. You can absolutely forget it. The interest, as the debt increases, the interest rate increases, the interest debt, the servicing on that debt continues to rise, which means that even if no more debt is accrued, the debt continues to climb. You got that? And what do we get out of it? Do we get more jobs? Do we get better pay? Do we get medical care, housing? No, we get none of that. We just get to send more weapons. We get more bullets, more bombs, more bodies, more blood. That's what we get out of this. And more debt, always more debt. So we are paying the banks. That's it. That's what we get out of this. So cheer for it all you want to. You're not in favor of peace if you're not in favor of peace talks. All right. Share this video. Talk about these subjects. If you can afford it, please donate whatever you can to help expand this channel and my presidential campaign. And I will catch you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a good day.